Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is a Monday night. Last time I was with you was on like a Friday night, I think last week. Oops, let me turn this off now. I'm waiting for a few more of you to hook up here. Let's see, what are we going to do? Let's look that way. That's the piano back there. I love that, for you to see that part of it. That's where Mads does all her. She's a classical pianist. Many people don't even know that. That was what she trained first. Went to the conservatory here in Tulsa, but she likes singing, and that's her passion. Comes out. She sits at the piano. She plays. She's done wonderful, but her light comes on when she gets in front of that mic on that stage and she starts singing. That's where she is tonight. I have a very interesting conversation. Now, some of you may on my Facebook have already seen the little. I think it's about a 4-minute. Exhortation, I would call it, actually a little admonishment from a psychologist who teaches at Yale, who represents a few dozen psychiatrists who think that the president is mentally unstable to hold position or to have access to the button that would initiate a nuclear holocaust. There's been 500,000 people seeing it already. It's out, I guess, fairly recent, but I wanted you to see it. And I keep talking about it because I think this is an issue that involves national security. This is the worst crisis, political and presidential crisis we've ever had. Worse than Nixon, worse than they impeached President Clinton, and then he was exonerated, but over certain moral things. I mean, sexual improprieties. That shouldn't be in the news about a president, and it's not something that puts the nation in the kind of danger that this man does. There was not the kind of polarities and arguments and criminal investigations to the sense that we've had with this president. So this is just a compilation of a lot of crazy stuff, and I've been very heartbroken because of the involvement of the church that I have been so in touch with all these years. The fundamentalist church that that I love and have worked with for all these years, and all of a sudden, bam! It just puts up with this crazy thing that we're dealing with right now. Really, really off the chain. So I want to talk tonight, and the president has been using as a term to incite fear and paranoia among his base. That we don't need, that America will never be socialist. So I want to talk about socialism, Christian socialism, and as opposed to Christian nationalism. The nationalism part, I've touched on that already. It has a lot of racism in it, white supremacy. And there are a lot of Christians who are white supremacists, but most of them are just white superioritists, I would call it, because I was one. And I wasn't white. It's just the idea that we're the chosen people and we own the truth and own the gospel and know God and know Jesus and fill the Holy Ghost and have the keys of the kingdom and decide who goes to hell and who goes to heaven and who's blessed and who isn't and who has the favor of the Lord and who understands scriptures. There's a lot of insinuations or innuendos in our faith that suggest elitism, bigotry, tribalism, arrogance. And I'm apologizing. I've repented to myself for allowing that energy to flow through me for the first 50 years of my life. But that's just the way I was trained. It's the way I was taught by my parents and their parents on both sides of the family, and millions of Christians, well-meaning Christians, wonderful Holy Ghost-filled Christians who love God and follow Jesus and know what the anointing is and love worship, but are misguided on those kinds of things. We have had this condescending attitude about the rest of the world, because we're told to win them, go into all the world and preach the gospel. At ORU, we were taught to go into every man's world and bring the good news. Well, the good news is that the bad news is all wrong. That's what I've been saying. That's what the radical inclusion message that got me in trouble with fundamentalist Christianity, to where I'm now a card-carrying heretic. I'm very proud to be so, because it just means I have an opinion that doesn't flow with the traditions, traded down ideologies. Most people haven't done the work, done the research, haven't taken the interest in doing that, and I have. People are wondering, well, with these killings and these murderings and these mass shootings, what about those people, the men who did that? Will they not go to hell? Those men are already in hell. Anybody that's bitter that has so lack of remorse, no compassion, so angry, so racist, that man is experiencing hell. We don't know, except by conjecture, what might happen after this life. I'm not against something that's remedial or curative or purgative about hell, but eternal doom and damnation and condemnation and eternal hatred is what that is, of weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth forever. Just there's no redemptive virtue in that. So that's why I don't buy into it. I don't know what will happen to people when they die who are evil. I do know if they did the kind of things that we're seeing, these people were already evil. They're vexed, they're tormented. Like Hitler. Hitler was looking over his shoulder. He was paranoid. He could never be fully free, never fully happy, and died that way. And so these murderers, they eventually, the one is in prison. He's numb and cold and hard. To me, that's hell. I don't want him to be there, or anybody to be there infinitely, because that would mean God, who and whatever God is infinitely angry, infinitely unforgiving. And the scriptures say his mercy endures forever. I'd rather believe that mercy will outlive and outlast judgment and condemnation. I think that's a Christ-conscious thought. It's a beautiful thought. I don't know why people are so resistant to it. They're so loyal to their anger, so loyal and devoted to hell and demons and devils. And a lot of them are saying, I have the devil in me. I understand that language. I've cast devils out. Even religious spirits, as in some of y'all on here fussing. I just need to cast a religious demon out of you, because you need to be free. I know that mentality. You're trapped. You're into a cult following of devils, and you don't know that you worship devils, and you give devils omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresence. You think the devil is everywhere and everybody but you. I was there. I understand. It's crazy, but it worked for me. And it worked on me, and later it began to work against me. So I've left that mentality after 50 some years, and I'm 66, into this new way of thinking. They say if you see something, say something. I posted that today. Well, I see something, and I've seen something, and I've been saying something for 2 years now, maybe more. I see danger. I see peril. I see haphazard leadership. I see, yes, racism and crookedness. But the thing that alarms me the most is not just about Trump, because Trump's always been Trump. It's his supporters, his enablers, many of whom are Christians. And that I find bothersome. I just have to keep addressing it. I think the church has had a mental lack. I think there's mental illness in what we're seeing out there. This president was talking about congresswomen, if they don't like America, leave, because they never have anything good to say about America. He doesn't either. He slams our Justice Department. He slams our intelligence. He slams our cities, our Congress people. He slams America constantly, thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. He never has anything good to say about America. And you people get back there and just cheer and grin and jump up and down like a bunch of clones and clowns. To me, I think it's just stupid. It's ridiculous. A misogynist, a racist, a xenophobic, homophobic, fascist, narcissist. How do we do this? How did we do this? So he uses out the socialism thing, and that scares a bunch of people to vote against anybody who's considered a liberal or a progressive. I'm a progressive. I know that there's certain elements of Christianity that are related directly to socialism, communism, common union, community, common unity, everybody sharing and eating together. That was the whole purpose of the Christian doctrine for many, many years. There was no lack among them in the book of Acts. Everybody ate, everybody had plenty there. Jesus said, I came to preach the gospel to the poor. That was the first thing that he said in his, what I call his inaugural message. So I want to discuss the difference in and the connection to Christian nationalism and Christian socialism. And remind you, any meaningful conversation or discussion about anything, we'd always need to take into consideration that words have different meanings to different people in any given situation or circumstance. It's called semantics. There are semantical difference. We have differences, but many of them are just semantics, the way we use words. It means, relates to meaning and language or logic. The meaning in the language, the logic in the language, what we say, whether you're a socialist or communist. There's actually, and I'll tell you, a group of Christian communists that believe that communism and is common unison, and communion is common union, and community is common unity. The people are coming together around a common ideology, sharing food, sharing jobs, sharing wealth, sharing worth. That everybody's equal or has their fair share of whatever's available, and nobody lacks, whether that's health, care, education, decent home to live in, food to eat, transportation, education. I like the whole idea of everybody having plenty, because there is plenty of everything. There's even plenty of love. It's just not dispersed. There's plenty of water. There's plenty of food. We Americans alone throw away millions of tons of food, edible food, every day, not just every year. We're known for excessive amounts of food being served in our restaurants. We take it for granted. We go to Europe, and I've been there many, many, many times, and all over the world. No country or culture serves the amount of food that Americans serve for the price. A lot of Europeans come to America because they save more money coming over here because there's plenty to see and do over here. But the food alone saves them money from vacationing as much in Europe. So remember, we'll talk about semantics, and I'm wrestling with animosity, to be honest with you. I'll just tell you, I'm wrestling with animosity, with animus and delusionment that religious people like to call righteous indignation. Okay, that's how we justify our anger. I'm ticked off by what I'm seeing. I'm disappointed, disillusioned by what I've seen. That's not my essence, but that is an experience that I'm having right now. Righteous indignation is typically a reactive emotion of anger over mistreatment, over insult, or malice of another. Everybody goes through it. We like to put righteous on it because it seems to be sublime and maybe benign. It's akin to what we call in the sense of injustice. When you see something happening, many people are screaming and pulling their hair out because we see all this injustice. I'm still bothered by the raid in Mississippi last week, and all those families that are disconnected. Of the 600 and some that were incarcerated or taken out, about 300 have returned back to their homes and their families, but they can't work, so they can't feed their families. These are men who are sweating beads at night, who have little children starting school this week, and they don't have a job that's going to give them the kind of income to give them lunches every day. I mean, that's just unconscionable. These people have lived in this country for years and worked for years and had babies and marriages and pay taxes. And they're decent people, church-going people. Many of them, if you're in Mississippi, you got to go to church. Many of them are, most of the Mexicans or Hispanics or Latinos would be Catholic, but not all of them. A lot of them are Protestants. Some of them are Pentecostals. Many of them are Pentecostals. They love the Lord. Preachers are struggling to try to keep these people fed. They're having to raise offerings, and it's just a crisis that the president created because of his anger and his vicious, mean spirit. He doesn't care. He's been called amoral since he's been in office. We've never had a president that had less compassion. We know he doesn't have compassion. When he reads with the teleprompter, he sounds boring and detached. Somebody else wrote the words. He doesn't want to say. When he deviates from the teleprompter, he goes into his crazy spill. Then everybody perks up. He has an energy about his anguish that he doesn't have about civility. So in some Christian doctrines, righteous anger is considered the only form of anger which is not sinful. When Jesus drove the moneylenders out of the temple, that's what we like to call righteous indignation. Why he did that is because part of the Jewish worship, when you go to the temple, you never go without a gift, a sacrifice. That could be a lamb or a goat, or rich people did that. Poor people brought pigeons or doves, and that's what Jesus folks brought. Many people lived in Jerusalem. They could bring a lamb or a goat or a pigeon. It wasn't hard because they just went to the temple. If you came from hundreds of miles away, and many of them did, on foot, some with donkeys and whatever, but most of them walked, they couldn't bring all that stuff with them. They waited till they got to Jerusalem, and they bought. And it was like scalping tickets. They would jack up the money changers who would change their money from whatever culture or country they came from, like we do in all foreign countries, would jack up the price so high that it was ripping the poor, struggling people off who were trying to follow the Jewish tradition of worshiping in the temple. Every Jew should do that once in his life. And I think every Christian should go there at least once in their lifetime. So Jesus saw it and he just snapped one day. You ever snapped? When you snap, you slap. He took out a whip, according to the narrative. He goes with this. He did that twice. He turned over the tables, used whips, and people ran. I mean, he just had a fit of rage. And that's the only time we see him do that. And I'm not necessarily saying it's justifiable, but it's explained, it's understandable to me. When you see poor religious people, that's what he meant when he said, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. You're heavy laden, trying to carry this heavy cross or this heavy crux of religion. All the laws, all the standards, all the doctrines, all the dogmas, all the dictates, all the rules, all the rituals. And he had compassion for people. And so that's what you call righteous indignation. Righteous is a reference to acting in accord or accordance with divine or moral law, to be free from guilt or free from, quote unquote, sin, missing the mark or offending God. It may also refer to a moral right, a justifiable decision or action or to an action, which raises or arises from outrage, a sense of justice or morality. So indignation is anger aroused by something unjust. We all have it. You don't have to be a Christian to have anger or indignation or even righteous indignation. You're just a person who has accurate appreciation for the human soul, the human self, the human psyche, the human being. And so you have this, you get aroused by something unjust or unfair, that's mean, that's unworthy. The Standard Dictionary describes indignation as a feeling involving anger mingled with contempt or disgust. I've experienced that. Not just now, I've experienced that many times in my life. I get angry. I have gotten disgusted about stuff. I'm more bothered by the political climate in America today. And this idiot, I hate to use such a term in reference to the solemn office of president. See, I'm not attacking the office, I am attacking the officer. He's not adequate. He should not be in that position. And I'm upset with Christians who put him there and who are the only ones that don't seem to have any sense of guilt or compunction. You're too arrogant and proud to say we made an error. This guy is a nut. He's a racist. He's a bigot. And he's going to eventually turn on you Christians. I can promise you that. As soon as you start criticizing him, he'll turn on you like a pack of wolves. He's already turned on his own party, the Republicans, plenty of times. He sees everybody who's not with him as an enemy. If they're not for us, they're against us. That's his mentality. Jesus is quoted in scripture saying if they're not against us, they're for us. Trump's thing is if they're not for us, they're against us. And he shows it out. Now, I want to talk about Christian socialism for a minute. Christian socialism, and I've always saw Christianity as a giving, sharing, justice-oriented, equitable mentality, helping the poor first, and making sure that everything, food, clothing, visitations, the scripture says pure religion and undefiled before God as you visit the widows and orphans in their affliction and keep yourself unspotted from the world. There's from the carnal aspects of the world. Pure religion and undefiled is that you visit the widows and orphans first. There's a lot of widows and orphans right now in our country. First from wars and what we're doing right now. That's why a lot of people, and Bishop Barber was back in El Paso last week. He called me twice from there. I was with him the week before. We were both there just before the week before this brutal murdering took place at the Walmart there. It could have been us. And I'm very touched by that, very moved and bothered, if you will, worried, if you will, about that kind of a thing. Not that I'm concerned about me. I think I'm under divine protection right now to do what I'm called to do. I know that sounds a little haughty, but I feel like there's some kind of Teflon around me because I should be angry and bitter. And some folks think I'm just a mad preacher. I'm not. I'm very disillusioned and very disenchanted and very disappointed in the religion that I've worked in all these years and the people with whom I've walked and worked. And nobody gives me a decent explanation. There was an African-American here, preacher. He's sorry that he voted, but he's a little Pentecostal guy. Came here to do an interview. And he was telling me that he voted for Trump. Millions dead. And many are having buyer's remorse, but some are too proud to say it. At least the leaders don't even indicate that there's anything upset. Many Christian socialists believe that capitalism is to be idolatrous and rooted in greed, which some Christian denominations consider a mortal sin. Greed. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. It's hard for a rich man to make it into heaven as it is a camel to go through the eye of a needle. There's a lot of misinterpreted, I think, passages that make us impoverished in our thinking about wealth and worth. I think there's a balance in there, and we're missing it. But Christian socialists believe in sharing and being not just loving, but compassionate, feeling the pain of others. I am kept awake at night, not with problems, but with solutions. But I'm bothered by, I'm going to go to sleep tonight and relax in my home, in my bed, my children. My mother's here. She's 89. My wife. I know we have so many blessings. And there are other people who live in this city who don't. I'm constantly giving, constantly sharing, supporting others who do. But there's a lot of families that are going to bed tonight in Mississippi. The kids are going to go to sleep because they don't really know anything yet. The dad's keeping some of that from, but the dads are just getting back home. They have to go back to court. They could be exported or deported from the country. This fear tactic, that's terrorism. These are decent men. These are not criminals and rapists and gamblers and thugs. These are working, decent, tax and some of them tithe-paying Americans. They just happen to be undocumented because it's so hard to get the documentation. Trump had hundreds of undocumented people working for him as recently as 2 years ago. All of his golf courses and all of his properties, he's been using undocumented or illegal aliens, as he would call them, for years. Now, all of a sudden, he's cleaning up camp because he told his base that he was going to, and that's racism and tribalism, and that Southern Christian base are the ones that were the big slave pushers and owners and saw the money. It was called slave trade. So that love of money was the root of a lot of evil done to people. And those same people are unrepentant, and they still feel like they should control the country and the culture and the government, and that they have all the answers, and they're the chosen people, and we got to save the world, and it's in God we trust, when it's very obvious to them that it's in guns that they trust, because that's what they rely on more than God. Or they'll get a gun and ask God to guide the bullet, make sure it hits its target. I understand the Second Amendment, and I'm for it. My dad has a gun, owned a gun as far as I can remember, a shotgun. He never shot anybody, of course, but we went hunting, and he would catch rabbits and things out in the mountains. And my uncles had guns; they were hunters, and all my uncles had Texas and Arizona and California. I'm not against guns. I'm against rabid racism, racists owning them. Rabid racist or terrorist or misogynist. Men have killed their wives with their guns. They don't even need knives. Certainly we don't need automatics. Those are what you use on a battlefield in war. This country's gone nuts. And this leader is triggering this fear-based mentality that everybody needs to get a gun. And now they've got laws in different states, like in Georgia, where you can actually wear your gun. It's called open. What is it called? Open something, Sam. You ain't paying no attention. He's over here on his text, and I'm trying to tell y'all something. There's conceal and then there's open carry. That's what it is, open and carry. You can actually walk down the street with a gun, a holster on, and show the gun like you're a cowboy. Now, there's so many crazy people, or you can snap and just go nuts for a minute and get angry. You see that in road rage. Very, very dangerous. Christian nationalism is Christianity-affiliated religious nationalism. Christianity-affiliated religious nationalism. Christian nationalists primarily focus on internal politics or policies, such as passing laws that reflect their view of Christianity and its role in political and social life. That's what Christian nationalism. They actively promote religious, primarily Christian, and nationalistic discourses in various fields of social life, from politics and history to culture and science. In Europe and the United States, Christian nationalism ranges from conservative to far right wing. What happened is it's gotten extreme. And racism has gotten into it. Globalists, many of us, we want to see the whole world. You Christians, remember, your Bible says, go ye into all the cosmos, all the world. For God so loved the cosmos, not America, didn't even exist at the time. There's nothing to support Christian nationalism because it becomes ethnic and tribalistic and clique and club and clone and clown. It becomes vicious and defensive and offensive. We're to love the world. We're to open our arms to the world. Most of the people trying to get in here are decent. We have far more thugs in this country. One is in the White House right now. He is the biggest threat to this country, more threat than any of these folks crossing these borders coming in here. Because he's president and he can make one decision, and he put the whole country on, shut it down for like 3 weeks. Cost us millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars, I should say. The $5 billion he wanted, he ended up costing the country $8 billion when he had the shutdown. And he's threatened to do it again. He's reckless. He's out of control. And he has a bunch of weak, mealy-mouthed people around him who kiss his butt. Excuse the terminology, but accept it. They're butt kissers. And he likes to kick butt, and they want to kiss his. I'm ashamed of these people. I'm ashamed of Mitch McConnell. I'm ashamed of the silence of the Republican Party. And I want the Democrats to do more. A lot of them are speaking up. Every candidate just about us has some really provocative and passionate things to say. I mean, they're screaming out to us. If you ignore these guys, we deserve whatever we get, because they're crying out. Everybody's calling. Even Scaramucci called the man a racist. I've got him in here, and if I can get to it. If Scaramucci says the president is crazy, there shouldn't be an argument. In America, we're accustomed to having gentlemen, scholars in the White House, not grotesque giants and monster men there. The man we have in the White House is anything but a gentleman. The farthest from one we've ever had in that sacred space or place or office in our history, in our country. I don't hate him. I hate what he's doing, a lot of what he's saying, how he's affecting our culture, how he's exposing our democracy. And I hate how evangelical Christians, more than anything, have jumped on his bandwagon with reckless abandon to and of the principles and peace patterns most Christians consider sacred and solemn and special to us as a people. They're just throwing it aside. And all I can see behind this is racism, control, arrogance, white privilege, superiority. Pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit, your Bible says, before a fall. Watch what's going to happen when they unveil what's happening in all these preachers' lives, their personal lives, and their ministries. Granted, none of us are perfect. That's not my point. But to act as if you are and preach against those who you assume are not and be imperfect is hypocritical. Imperfect is hypocritical. To act like you're so smug and righteous and we're pro-life and yet you're pro-death at the same time. Most evangelical white right-wing Christians are pro-capital punishment. We got all these babies, warehouse, some of them in foster care stay in 30 and 40 different homes and are abused in nearly every one and do things out of their anger. Our prisons are filled with kids that grew up in foster homes or fatherless homes. There's a disproportionate amount of African Americans and Latinos behind prison bars. I think white people are afraid they're going to become the minority. We haven't acted out as minorities, and we don't have bitterness and rage in our hearts. Did Obama breathe blood? He was president of the United States. He wasn't near as arrogant as this man, and throwing his weight around and calling people names and chopping folks up. This guy's a nut. He has no business being there. And you Christians ought to be embarrassed and apologetic. And you should want him out like any other sober, sane, thinking person. And I speak specifically to you because I'm of you. I'm a part of you. You can kick me out all you want. I grew up with y'all. I know how you think. I know how you read and interpret scripture. I can quote it with the best and rest. I know how you live. I know how raggedy some of us can be. I know how raggedy some of you preachers are. And you're all smug and quiet and won't say anything. I'm disappointed. And so that's why I'm for socialism, Christian socialism. And I don't want you to let the Trump use that term and scare y'all to the ballots voting against the progressives because we don't know you don't even know what socialism is in most cases. I've worked to help bring about greater unity, harmony, love, synergy, synchronicity, and camaraderie, particularly within Christianity, all my life. And I was good at it. And I'm proud of what I did. But also, I wanted it to be more unity at large in this country. And now I realize, after observing with stunning disappointment, that I actually failed at accomplishing such a wonderful feat, a precious feat. Donald Trump's election, his statements, his policies, his unprincipled leadership has brought out the truth. And I might add the worst in evangelical Christianity, simply because he says horrible things that titillate and satiate his base. Christians should be ashamed and embarrassed and hang their head over this. And these most of you Christians are white evangelicals that support him, not all of you. And I know that sounds like a racist statement, but I'm disappointed at that too. There's millions of Christians who are not evangelicals, but they love God. They love Jesus. They love the scriptures. They take them seriously, just not all literally. They're decent people. There are more white people calling him a racist, and that just bothers him. He keeps saying he's not a racist. Everybody knows he's a racist. But that's not the only thing that's bad. He just doesn't care about people. He's not just a racist. Donald does not care about people in general. He doesn't care who he hurts. High profile, low profile, popular, unpopular. He generally does not care. Whatever makes him feel like he's a god or a demon god. Demon god is what he is. He wants to be a dictator. You know, I told somebody the other day he's just a dick. He want to be a dictator. Were any other group involved in this, I could probably be less vocal about it, and I would. But he's ridiculous. He's just ridiculous. And I'm trying to shake you folk to wake up. We can't put this man back in the White House for another 4 years. We can't do that. Well, the prophecy said that, forget about those prophets. There's been a lot of false prophets out there. And what's bad is when a true prophet falsely prophesies. And I've seen that. I've seen anointed, gifted, called prophets give false prophecies. And I've seen false prophets be very accurate in their prophecies. I've seen good things happen to and through horrible people. And I've seen horrible things happen to and through good people. So I got a balance out here. This is too obvious, folks. If Anthony Scaramucci can say this man is a racist, we should all stop and make note. Trump hates to be called a racist by his adversaries, and especially Democrats, but even racists in America applaud him for being a racist. When a racist calls you a racist to their satisfaction, that leaves no little room for argument. I'm going to quote Scaramucci. He said today on TV, I think what will end up happening is sound and reasonably minded men and women in the Republican Party will say, wait a minute, we can't do this. That's Scaramucci. Now notice how he says sound and reasonably minded men and women in the Republican Party will finally say, wait a minute, we can't do this. He's given people a license to hate, to provide a source of anger, to go after each other. And he does it on his Twitter account. You never know. We can't control this man. He's up all hours of the night. He can't sleep. And whatever comes to his mind, unfiltered, he just blurts it out. For him to accuse the Clintons and implicate them in relationship to the Epstein suicide as if they had something to do with it, trying to kill him. I mean, even if he thought that, you don't say that kind of stuff. I would sue him for defamation of character if I were the Clintons. I wouldn't let him get by with it. This man is reckless and uncouth. He's a buffoon. And Americans, we should stop this. He needs to be out of there. He's way off the chain. And I posted last night some of the things that he's done, but he takes a lot of credit for things that Obama and even Bush started way before he got there. You don't turn a country around in 2 years. That's trillions of dollars in debt. Trump has added several trillion since he's been in office. On Mondays, Scaramucci also cited Trump's combative tactics on Twitter. I'm quoting him. He goes after individuals as the president of the United States on his Twitter account, okay, which incites hate. Okay? He incites hate, incites death threats, he said. I mean, I'm quoting him, at some point, I think the people in my party, speaking of the Republicans, will have to look at this stuff and stop being anesthetized to it and say, hey, what are we doing? Now, you can say what you will about Scaramucci. He loves the cameras. He's good looking. He's smart. He's witty. He has a genius about him. Anybody that's around him, he's good. He's quick, funny. He knows what he's talking about. He's probably a lot self-centered and self-serving, but he's not president of the United States. And he fitted in that group because he has the kind of arrogance that the president has. But at least he's sobered up enough to know this man is sick. And we better listen, people. Psychiatrists, psychologists are saying it. Intelligent, well-trained, many people who used to be great supporters of him are saying this is enough. Instead of some of those Republicans actually speaking what's in their heart, they resign and say, I'm not going to run again. But they won't say anything. They cannot stand, or they're so afraid of Donald Trump mentioning them publicly and calling them a name. We used to say, sticks and stones will hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me, or something like that. Well, that's not true with these Republicans. They are afraid of this man's word. They're afraid of his mouth. They all know that he's the worst personality we've ever had in public office in this country as president. It's stunning. It's staggering. How can Scaramucci wake up and Jim Baker or Jerry Falwell and Franklin Graham not? And you Southern Baptist presidents and convention leaders and pastors of these big, rich, arrogant churches. How can Scaramucci, who worked with the man in the office, helped him with his campaign, counseled him, then he turns and says, this guy's an idiot. He's a racist bigot. We need to move him. And you all are stupid. You're embarrassing. I'm ashamed of all of you. And I would say this to your face. To associate gun violence with God violence is what evangelicals bring to the table on this delicate incendiary issue. Gun violence is God violence if all the God worshipers and followers are using the violence or supportive of the violations. That's what violence means. Evangelicals believe in, trust, worship, and serve a God with a profoundly violent reputation. God in the Bible has a reputation of being angry, jealous, and vengeful. Donald Trump. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. It's in the Bible. I'm a jealous God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I used to preach that stuff and warn the people. I don't even believe in that God anymore. And I'm giving millions permission not to as well. Don't be afraid of that God. I don't believe in fearing gods. I fear people. Like these murderers are running around. But the God I perceive in my soul itself, I don't fear. For all of you who are concerned about America becoming a socialist nation, Christianity itself is a form of religious socialism. Communism and or communion, or as I told you earlier, are both forms of the radical inclusion and diversity of the gospel to the poor. That's what community, and some aspects of communism is. Jesus mentioned it in his inaugural sermon, Luke 14. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me, or some translations say, therefore he has anointed, basically appointed me to proclaim the good news, not to the rich, not just to the Jews of the church, to the poor. That's his first statement. I have a ministry to the poor. That's what William Barber uses as one of the bases for his ministry. Dr. King, Martin Luther King, started the Poor People's Campaign. It died down. William Barber has reinstituted, and it's swelling by thousands and thousands across this country. Most of them are white people who are progressives and who are compassionate and who care about hurting people. A lot of them are not necessarily the Pentecostals that I thought there'd be more. They're Episcopalians and Unitarians and United Church of Christ and Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Their leader was there, Bishop. The bishop was with us. There was a rabbi there that represents 2 million Reformed Jews. There's a brilliant young imam that takes families in 50 at a time. I think it has a place compound down in Dallas and matriculates them into the country and helps them find homes in the country that they'll have sponsoring families. A Muslim, sweetest man, young, way younger than I am, brilliant, spoke on what I would call the anointing, was powerful down there. Who are the poor? Tokos is the Greek word. And it's an adjective describing one who crouches, cowers, stoops, or lowers him or herself to hide oneself because of fear. That's happening in Mexico right now, throughout this country, in Latino houses. Hispanics that are incompletely, they're not completely documented. They're legally here, but they don't have all the papers and all the forms and all the profiles. They're stooping, they're hiding. They won't even come out public because they're afraid they're going to get caught. They won't go to a restaurant. They're going to take their kids to the swimming pools. Some of them don't want to get in their car and take their kids to school. Or they don't want their kids to get on a public bus. They don't know. This is terror. And we're going to reap what we sow if we don't cry out against this. This is wrong, America. This is wrong. And you enablers are just as guilty as the man that's instigating this stuff, because he's doing it because he thinks you like it. When he goes to these cities and all these big crowds come and he makes these rash, horrendous, painful statements, send her back, lock her up, all these horrible things. It's always about women. But y'all just cheer, so gullible and stupid. You look foolish, I'm telling you. Packed in there with your big stupid hats on. You look dumb. You're way out of place. Today, this group who are Tokos, who are the poor that Jesus would have been preaching to, that's millions of immigrants who are legally here, not fully documented, as the process can be long and drawn out, especially for those with little money. When you don't have money and clout, affluence, or influence like Ivanka Trump, who lives in the White House, does, she's an immigrant too, and her parents are as well. But she has ties. Her parents have ties. And anybody that Trump's and the high-profile people want to come from any country, he seems to love Norway, can do it. So this word poor that Jesus used in the Greek means beggars, poverty-stricken people, powerless to enrich themselves. They don't have the wherewithal. It's a reference to positioned and conditioned poverty or impoverishment. Now, granted, the scripture says the poor you have with you always. Well, treat them right. You know, he has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners or the captives, those who have been captured and led through a town like slaves and become slaves. That's usually a reference to war and somebody's been captivated, as Jesus is referred to, that he led captivity captives and gave gifts to men, where he supposedly went to hell, preached the gospel, and took the captives out of hell or something like paradise and put them in heaven or put them in paradise. Whole nother subject. Recovery of sight to the blind, those who are dulled by their intellect, by smoke, somebody blowing smoke. That's what that really means. And people, they're just like zombies. Literally, The Walking Dead. There's such a popular program. There's all these movies and programs about The Walking Dead. I've never been able to watch one through it. They seem ridiculous, but I think when something is that popular and that public, from this president to Walking Dead, we should pay attention to what message is behind that. What is that darkness in our culture? What about The Walking Dead? Dulling of the intellect to set the oppressed free, he says. Socialism is defined as a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Private prisons, what do we call that? Privatizing prisons, where a man or family owns a prison and gets paid by the government for every head that's in there. No wonder they're wanting to put just anybody in prison they can, particularly Latinos and African Americans, because they get paid by them. We pay them. And people are making millions off of that. That should not be possible in this country. You know, some of these big families owning whole corporations, these big mergers where a few percentage, 1%, owns and controls everything from the television networks to the money. And it's just scary. It's just frightening. So Socialism believes that everything should be owned by everybody, not controlled by the government, but owned by all the participants. It's birthed out of the Christian concept of communion, common union. That's where that idea comes from. Christianity is a form of socialism. The socialist parties that have arisen in most European countries from the late 19th century have generally tended toward social democracy. It's tended to work for them too. Look around the country. We embrace some aspects of it here in America. But the word itself is usually associated with people like Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Mussolini, and other men considered ruthless and evil communists, despots who hurt, hate, and murder people. Now, that might be the president of the United States in these days. But to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or to throw all socialist approach, I like many of the things that Bernie says. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of the Democratic presidential candidates are making a lot of sense. They're under a lot of pressure. They have to think carefully how they say, what they say, when they say it, and to whom. Because they're all running, and Republicans are too cowardly to run. There's a lot of very decent, brilliant, brilliantly qualified Republican people who could run for president, but they dare not, because it's a good old boys club and everybody's beholden to this guy. There's something else going on that we don't know about. It's probably dark, but that has these Republicans just so shut up like this. Christian communism, let me bring this up real quick, is a form of religious communism based on Christianity. It actually exists. I didn't know that until I did some research. It is a theological and political theory based upon the view that the teachings of Jesus Christ compel Christians to support communism as the ideal social system. Now, that sounds a little bit extreme because the semantics, remember I mentioned that earlier? Communism just sounds demonic and devilish, and we've all preached against it. Although there is no universal agreement on the exact date when Christian communism was founded, many Christian communists assert that evidence from the Bible, like in Acts, the apostles, suggests that the first Christians, including the apostles, established their own small communist society in the years following Jesus' death and resurrection. There's a passage in Acts that says there was no lack among them because everybody brought their stuff and they compiled it together and made sure that everybody had something to eat, something to wear, and someplace to live. Simple. As such, many advocates of Christian communism argue that it was taught by Jesus and practiced by the apostles themselves. Well, maybe it was in spirit, but they wouldn't have used that terminology, of course. But they were socialists and moralists, and they did care, and they shied away from rich people controlling everything. There were very many rich people that followed women that followed Paul and took care of him out of their purses, and Jesus as well. The ointment that Mary Magdalene gave him, or the prostitute gave him, whoever that was worth a year's wages in prostitution, and it was fragranted. Some of the most expensive cologne you could buy. He let her actually anoint his body with it and cry and wipe it with her hair. She must have had long flowing hair. That would have been pretty sensual to me. You know, a woman wiping your body with fragranted stuff. And that's, but Jesus seemed to enjoy it too. So anyway, I want to say something about capitalism, which is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Some aspects of capitalism I support. I think it's harmless, but others about it are dangerous and can lead to greed and self-centeredness. Elements of that would form a basis of Christian socialism are found in the Old and New Testament. So communism and capitalism, they don't always clash. I think there's always going to be, like the scripture says, the poor you'll have with you always, means you'll always have the rich with you too. Because it wouldn't be poor. You can't define poor if there's no rich. Okay? It's like everybody's news is nobody's news. So there's always going to be rich. There always has been rich. And I'm not denouncing rich people or rich people with riches. Some of my best friends have them, and I appreciate them very much. Excessive ownership and controlling the economy to the place that you enjoy 90% of what's available, and the other percent gets nothing is just not reasonable, not tolerable, not acceptable. The Old Testament had divided perspectives on the issue of poverty. One part of the Jewish tradition held that poverty was judgment of God upon the wicked. And a lot of wealthy people, blue bloods, kings, monarchies, Trump type people, actually think their wealth is a sign of the favor of God's divine blessing on them, and that poverty is a curse of God. David says, I once was young and now I'm old. I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor its seed begging bread. Rich people don't beg. It's hard for you to have the kind of success that Trump has had and other oligarchs from Russia and Europe and billionaires. It's hard for you to have that kind of, even though you have curses all over your family, it's hard to believe that the blessing of the Lord maketh rich. It's hard not to believe that. And adds no sorrow. You got to remember the adds no sorrow. So the blessing of the Lord maketh rich and addeth no sorrow, if you're going to be scriptural about it. But most of the blue bloods around the world, in all the cultures, consider themselves a certain aspect of divinity. They're divine leaders, whether they're Caesars or czars or presidents or prime ministers, or they own land and property and stuff like that. It goes to their head, and they generally are kind, but they also are demagogues. One part of the Jewish tradition held that poverty was judgment of God on the wicked, while viewing prosperity as a reward for the good, stating that righteous has enough to satisfy his appetite. That's scripture. But the belly of the wicked suffers want. The righteous has enough to satisfy his appetite. That's Proverbs. But the belly of the wicked suffers want. However, there are other sections that instruct generosity to the have-nots of society. The Torah instructs followers to treat neighbors equally and to be generous to have-nots, such as stating, generous to have-nots, or people who are poor, such as stating, you shall not oppress your neighbor, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. It's actually a quotation from the Lord in Leviticus. He, the Lord your God, executes justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothing. Love the sojourner, the immigrant. Therefore, for your immigrants or sojourners in the land, you were sojourners or immigrants in the land of Egypt. He's talking to Jews, saying, be kind and be gracious. And our city, or the Jews in this town, are some of the most philanthropic and benevolent, the money Jews that anywhere. I mean, we have a lot of buildings named after them. It's part of the Jewish concept of eternity is to let your money live when you're gone by building hospitals and clinics and wells and bridges and buildings and, helping the culture. Families in Tulsa have done that beautifully. I could go on. There's a whole bunch of scriptures support that support some aspects of socialism. But my point is, I don't want you to be alarmed by the term socialism. Any presidential candidate who is accused of being socialist just means they are more for justice and equity, for fairness, not greed. The Republicans, and I was one from 1980 until Obama ran for president. I became a Republican in 1980. I was hanging around with the James Robinsons and doing CBN a lot with Pat Robertson and substituting for Ben Kinchlow, who just made his transition last week. I was doing PTL and doing Paul Crouch, and Oral was always saying, don't get too far. Oral was always a Democrat, Oral Roberts. Voted for Obama. Didn't get to vote the second time because he had made his transition, but he would not be in support. I'm going to tell you, as a man that worked with him for 40 years, he would not be supportive of this arrogant prick in the White House. Not at all. And they wouldn't have had him on our campus. The Greens seem to like that kind of stuff. And they're good people, and I'm grateful for them because they helped Oral die with a debt-free ministry, and they're carrying on our university beautifully. So very happy at that part, but they're just so conservative, it scares me. Spent $1 billion on a Bible museum. That's a lot of money to spend to prove the existence of a book that's inaccurate and that's man-made and may have a lot of deception and lies in it as well. Whole nother subject. But my sister went to see it. She said it's fantastic, and I plan to go incognito there myself one day. Our time is just about up. I want you to reconsider what I said. Notice the little and pass it around, share with everybody. Those of you who are on my streaming conscious site, you can't. It's a closed group. I had to have it to have anything, and you can't share that anything I put on there. I wish you could. I don't have the permission, even though I own it. But if you go to Carlton Pearson, that's free. All of them are free, but I mean there are no limits there. I have to stop at 5,000 on the other two sites, and they're packed. This other one, there's unlimited amounts of friends and followers I can have. So feel free to check that out, see what it offers, and see if you like what's there. And then you can share anything I put on there. I don't mind you sharing anything, ever. I love you, and I wouldn't want to be. I'm thankful for you. I don't get a lot of support. I wish I got more. I don't know why some of you don't support more. You tend to really like what I say, and you hear regularly. But I need support for what I'm doing. We've cut down a lot. I'm back here in the house, but it's wonderful. And I save money by working from here. I still pastor people in this town indirectly. A lot of my members get in trouble. They need things. And I have New Dimensions here in Tulsa. And people have to be visited. Some people want me to do their funerals or their weddings. Just visit them, love on them. And there are thousands of people who still call me Pastor Carlton. And I don't preach but 2 Sundays a month, and that's at the All Souls Unitarian Church. And they love me, and I love them. I'm a part of it. David's there, Nikki's there, Walter Armstrong, and even former chief of security, Ron Halford. I could go through a long list. Mother White, been my church mother for a long time. Me and my mother enjoys going. So next fall, for her 90th birthday, we're going to have a big celebration for her there. And I'd like for some of you to acknowledge her. Some of you may want to even come to town. Anyway, good things are happening. I share my heart. I share it out of love, concern for our country, concern for our culture. I believe that I'm supposed to be here right now to help, as a midwife, take us through this change. Sometimes I come across as harsh and disgusted, and I am feeling harsh and disgusted, but I've never stopped loving anybody, including Donald Trump and all of his supporters. I warn you like I warned other people against sin as a preacher. You know, we were Pentecostals, we get on sin, and I think it's a sin to support some of the things this man is doing. And so I would warn you against it. I don't think you're going to go to hell, but I believe we're all going to go through it because of this kind of stuff. They're predicting another recession just around the corner. This tariffs and taxes things that Trump's doing is going to take the country into some major debt. We got to have some changes here. Again, I love you. God bless you. God be you. Thank you for listening tonight. Pass this on. Be a part. Anything you could send would be great. The donation information is on the screen there. $10, $20, $50. Some of you said, well, I'd give you $1,000 if I had it. Well, give what you have. Okay? That would be helpful. All right. God bless you. Love you so much. Fade out now. Love you all. Hi, Peggy. Oh, bless you, Rosalind, Sabrina, Jimmy, Ophelia, Esther. Let's see. I'm reading as best I can. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Even if you don't agree with me, I still love you, and you're welcome. Okay. Good night.